Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 171 of Who's the Bossk? And we will be discussing the latest and penultimate episode of Star Wars Ahsoka on Disney Plus. And for that conversation, I have invited back on the show my fellow Laughing Place contributor and friend Bekah Burbank. Bekah, how are you? Thank you so much for coming back to chat with me about some more Star Wars.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm very excited about this episode. I can't believe just how well things worked out that I get to be on the podcast for this episode.
Oh, great. I'm excited to find out why you say that specifically. But first, I want to remind folks out there, if you are watching this live, we are live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel and elsewhere. If you want to comment, we'll be happy to address any questions or concerns you may have. And then I want to ask you, Bekah, how are you? What have you been up to? What are some things that you've been doing lately for Laughing Place?
I'm doing good in terms of like personal life. My husband and I just started looking for houses in our area, so that's uh that's an interesting step in your life, right? And
Yes.
then in terms of Laughing Place, I have lots of merchandise. I do want to say I'm wearing a reversible jacket from Roosevelt's that they gave to me, so
Awesome.
I didn't pay for it, but it looks like Thrawn on one side, and then it's blue on the other side with his Chiss emblem and all that fun stuff. But yeah, lots of merchandise in the Star Wars universe and some stuff in the Marvel universe now that Loki's coming back.
Yeah, so you got the Barely Necessities weekly merchandise show
Mhm.
on YouTube, on the Laughing Place YouTube. Any other merch lately that has stuck out to you or that you would want to highlight?
I'm trying to think. You've had some really cool stuff, mostly Ahsoka related. You had a really cool
Yeah.
unboxing video, that Chatterback Chopper.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, my co-host on Barely Necessities, she was enamored with that too. So I think that's a good thing, right? Like it's perfect for adult fans and for kid fans.
Yeah, I was surprised by how much I liked that. Like I didn't really know what to expect, but once you can see in the video on this YouTube channel,
Yes.
how surprised I was by how lifelike he was. Like he really reminded me, the movement really reminded me of Chopper from the cartoon and from the live action show too. So definitely recommend that. And that's going to bring us to the 5 Star Wars questions, which I looked into it. I believe you're up to level 3, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is your third time answering the 5 Star Wars questions, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. So you ready for these questions?
I am. Let's do it.
All right. The 5 Star Wars questions, level 3. Number 1, what is your favorite Star Wars book or comic book, and why? Do you have a favorite of those, Rebecca?
I
Becca?
haven't read the comics. I haven't, yeah, really read any of the comics, but I've some of the. Is it the Legends series? Is that what it's called? The non-canon stuff.
Yeah, so it was called the Expanded Universe back when they were coming out, but now they refer to it as Legends. Yeah.
So I've read some of the Timothy Zahn books, and
Nice.
I was telling Kyle, there's a book called Survivor's Quest, which
Yeah.
is a story with Luke and another, I guess, former Dark Jedi or Force sensitive being, Mara Jade. They get married, not in this book, but I I don't remember much about the story. It's more a feeling, a memory of enjoying my experience with it. And it was Timothy Zahn who wrote that. So I think I'm going to put that as my favorite.
Yeah, that novel actually came out in my late teens after I had stopped reading the Star Wars novels, I think probably to go to college. But I do have it and I do plan to read it eventually. Like I'm kind of gradually working my way all through the entire Legends timeline, but I like
That's quite an undertaking.
it is. It's a tremendous amount of stuff, but I started at the very beginning. Like I started chronologically at the beginning with the Old Republic stuff. So
Yes.
I'll eventually get, all the way through up to the post Return of the Jedi era, which is when Survivor's Quest is set. But yeah, Timothy Zahn, I love his writing, and I've read all of his current canon novels, and then the original Thrawn trilogy
hmm
from that
I'm
era.
I'm actually re-listening to that right now on an audiobook from the library. I was
Nice.
like preparing for Ahsoka, kind of, and I was familiar with Thrawn, but wanted to revisit the character. So, yeah.
Yeah, those books are so great. And if you're enjoying Thrawn on the show, definitely go and check those out. Number two, if you could own a life-size working replica of any Star Wars vehicle, which would you choose?
I mean, I think it's got to be the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, yeah,
I
wise
don't
man.
have any attachment to any other vehicle, speeder bike, anything like that. So it's ridiculous, but yeah, I'm very very classic in that sense.
Gotta go with the classic. Now you've been to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and gotten to see what I believe is the very first like life-size full
Yes.
360-degree Millennium Falcon ever built. What did you think of that experience?
I liked it. The ride isn't my favorite
Yeah,
Star Wars experience, but yeah, just being able to like walk onto the ship is incredible.
yeah,
Like I would like to be able to spend more time on there without
right.
being in a queue. Just like, hey, you get to hang out here for a couple hours or something.
I wonder what would happen if you went in there by the hollow chessboard or whatever, and were just hanging out, and when they called your number, you just didn't go. Like,
Did it
if you
go?
just decided to just hang out in there, would they
Yeah,
eventually kick you out? I don't know.
yeah. I wonder how long you'd be able to do that.
Number 3, what is your favorite non-human sentient Star Wars alien species? So we're not talking about the creatures here, like the pets, like a loth cat or
Mhm.
a womp rat. We're talking about aliens that you can like have a conversation with, like a Mon Calamari or a Quarren or a Twi'lek, however you want to pronounce it. Do you have a favorite one of those species?
I hadn't really thought about a favorite, but I really like Babu Frick. So,
Okay.
Anzelin, is
And
that?
Zelen, yes.
And I'm intrigued by Maz Katana. So, like to spend more time with them. I looked it up on
Yeah.
Wikipedia, and they they said her species is unknown.
Okay, so they've never said what Maz Kanata's species is, but yeah, Anzellans are very adorable. We've seen them on The Mandalorian as well, and
Yes.
one of them designed the Halcyon from the Galactic Star Cruiser. Too. So in the background lore of the Galactic Star Cruiser, there's also one. So that's a wonderful choice. Very hilarious, an adorable little species. Which we have a new one of those on Ahsoka as well. We'll talk about them a
Yeah.
little bit later. Number 4. What is your favorite piece of Star Wars music and why?
Okay, I'm not gonna say the main theme because that's like way too basic of an answer, right? um, I really like the TV series, the theme, or especially Ludwig Göransson's themes for Mando and Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm really loving the Ahsoka end credits. I believe it's Kevin Kiner, and it reminds me of Game of Thrones, but I like that, like the probably because of the cello, but it
Yeah.
feels like heavy with history, if you will, and there's like an intensity to it, but it's also kind of hopeful, and it feels to me very balanced, like Ahsoka, something that I've been listening to over and over again. So right now, I'm gonna go with something very new and the Ahsoka theme.
Terrific choice. Yeah, and Kevin Kiner is such a talented guy, and he's been contributing to Star Wars for so long. Kyle Burbank, who you may know, says in the comments,
Mhm.
almost RIP Halcyon, which, yeah, I think today the penultimate voyage on the Halcyon Galactic Star Cruiser wrapped up. And I want to say tomorrow will begin the final voyage, which ends on the 30th. Yeah, that math adds up, I think. So um happy final voyage on the Halcyon. I know a bunch of
Yeah.
people down there for that. I have some friends on this penultimate voyage that just wrapped up, and they're having a big like kind of going away or farewell party at the Planet Hollywood in Disney Springs for this. So hope everyone enjoys that. And yeah, very sad to see that go. I know it was a big challenge, a big risky undertaking. So it's not a tremendous surprise that you got to do that experience. Becca, what did you end up thinking of the Galactic Star Cruiser?
I loved it. I think the 2 days was just enough time because I wanted to stay longer.
Yeah,
It was like we were a little worried about how much interactive, I guess, role play we would have, but
Yeah,
it wasn't forced on anybody in any way. And you actually, like, I felt like I actually want to participate. Um, yeah, an
yeah.
incredible experience. I'm sad to see it go.
Yeah, those are both really good points that and they tried to get that across in some of the marketing that you can kind of choose your own level of interactivity. And then I know the length of the stay was a sticking point to some people because some people thought it should, for the price it should be a longer amount of time. But I was saying, yeah, by the end of that, it's close to 2 days length, and by the end of that, you're like ready to you're excited, you had a great experience, but it's so chock full of stuff that you're pretty much ready to get out of there and also excited about the possibility of returning, I would say.
Hmm.
So number five, the fifth and final of the five Star Wars questions, level three. This is a good one. If you could go back in time and be present for the filming of any Star Wars live action scene, be there on the set while they're shooting it, which would you choose?
So I feel like I probably should have given this more thought and really gone back through, like, because you're talking about the movies too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
but no, I'm sticking with something much more recent.
Okay.
I love Grogu, and that final scene in season two, or the goodbye scene at the end of season two between Mando and Grogu, I think would be incredible to witness the filming. You've got an amazing group of characters there. You've got Fennec Shand and Bo-Katan
Yeah.
and Cara Dune, and then you've got the familiarity of Luke Skywalker and R2D2, and just this beautiful moment. And then, yeah, spoilers if you haven't watched it, I guess I
Yeah,
should.
yeah.
But yeah, that's such a beautiful emotional scene. I would like to be on set for that.
I don't know if you've seen any of the behind the scenes stuff about how they shot that scene, but you may have heard this story, but they like told everybody on set except for like a very very small amount of people, the people who like desperately had to know. They told everyone else that it was a different Jedi. Like nobody knew that it was Luke Skywalker. They told everyone it was Plo Koon, who's like
Okay.
famously Dave Filoni's favorite Jedi from the prequel era. And then like they brought back just like a skeleton crew of like the essential people who needed to be there for Mark Hamill and his double or whatever to film the Luke Skywalker stuff. So you might have had to like be present for two different shoots, but
That's true.
very very good choice and such a wonderful memorable scene from season 2 of The Mandalorian. So I love it. Okay, let's get into Star Wars headlines for this week. The big news that kind of came out over the past week that I was kind of shocked by, and I know kind of took the internet by storm. And usually I don't really comment on like rumors and stuff like that, but this was confirmed by the filmmakers. So Guillermo del Toro, very famous director, he made
Mhm.
Pan's Labyrinth, he made The Shape of Water. Oscar-winning filmmaker, was set to direct a Star Wars movie. He said about 6 years ago, which I kind of took to be probably likely around the time that Solo, a Star Wars story, came out and
Okay.
underperformed at the box office. And this is when they kind of pulled back on pre-production on a lot of these Star Wars movies. So it was going to be written by David S. Goyer, who wrote The Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan Batman movie, Dark City, another great movie with dark in the title, Batman Begins, and also Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which I didn't like as much, but still, he's got a pretty good track record.
Yeah.
So also Guillermo said in his tweet confirming it that he like gave a couple hints. He gave the letter J and the letters BB, and people argued about, theorized what this might have meant for a long time. And what they kind of settled on based on like other interviews that had come out with Guillermo talking about Star Wars is that it would have been a Jabba the Hutt movie because he's talked
Oh.
about how much he loves Jabba the Hutt. And he like identifies with them. He joked in one interview that Jabba was the only Star Wars character that looked like him, like Guillermo.
Oh.
But in some interview somewhere, he had talked about how he wanted to make like a crime movie about Jabba the Hutt, kind of like The Godfather. But my interpretation now, thinking about it a little bit more since this news broke, is BB might be Breaking Bad, which is also like a crime
Okay.
story about the rise of a gangster type figure. So my guess is like Breaking Bad, but with Jabba the Hutt, which would have been awesome, I'm sure. I don't know. Are you a fan of Guillermo del Toro? Have you seen any of his stuff? And do you think he would have made a good Star Wars movie?
I've I've seen Pan's Labyrinth. So, and for it's been a long time. From what I remember, I really liked it. It was a little disturbing, but it was
Yeah,
well done.
yeah,
I Yeah, I think he would have made a very interesting, uh, unexpected Star Wars film.
yeah.
Something that we're not used to with what we currently have. So,
Right. It is kind of a shame. It feels like kind of a shame that it didn't happen. I think it
mhm.
just came about at the wrong time for the industry and for Star Wars in general, unfortunately. Hopefully maybe they'll circle back around to that. I don't know if he's still interested or if the moment has just passed entirely, like with his Haunted Mansion movie that was supposed to happen as well. But it does feel like kind of a bummer that such a acclaimed, talented filmmaker didn't get to make his Star Wars vision. But things happen for a reason sometimes, so we'll just kind of have to write that one off, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So this week had some new comic books come out. I haven't had a chance to read them yet. Feeling a little under the weather today, unfortunately, but I haven't been able to go out to the comic shop to pick these up. But we have Dr. Aphra number 36, Hyperspace Stories number 9, and The Mandalorian season 2 adaptation number 4. So I will be reading them eventually and writing up my reviews of those once I feel up to going out and picking them up.
Do
Uh,
you have a
yeah,
favorite of these? Because these are all continuing stories. Do you have a favorite, or which one of these three are you most interested in?
oh, definitely Dr. Aphra,
Okay,
is
that's what
my
I
favorite
thought.
of these 3. Yeah, I just love that character. She's kind of the Indiana Jones of the Star Wars universe, but a little bit more on the chaotic neutral side rather than,
Okay.
Indy is very much on the good
Yes.
side. Aphra has allied herself with both the good and evil characters. And she's very much like self-serving in a way that Indiana Jones is not. But she is like an archaeologist, and she gets into all sorts of these adventures seeking out like the artifacts of the ancient galaxy. So definitely up my alley. The writing is always so good on that title as well. Hyperspace Stories has been really hit or miss for me.
Mm,
That's just like an anthology series
okay.
from IDW where like each issue is about a different character in the Star Wars galaxy and different time, different periods in the timeline. And the Mandalorian adaptation is just like a very literal,
Okay.
almost like word for word adaptation of the TV show. So it almost doesn't even have to exist. But I've been enjoying that just for the artwork, like
Sure.
to see the interpretation of the scenes from the show in comic book form. So those are my thoughts. I haven't read this week's issues yet, but I will be checking them out soon. But there is more news
Mhm.
from the comic book world. Last year in November, we got a comic book one shot issue. A one shot is just a single issue. It doesn't have like a number 2 coming out, called Star Wars Revelations, which is getting kind of a number 2 this December. So they're doing this again. And what this was, Revelations, in the first issue, it was Darth Vader getting these visions of things to come in the Star Wars comic book stories. And I think based on the cover of this second one that they're doing, I think instead of Darth Vader, it's actually Jabba the Hutt this time.
Yeah.
So I think, did you write up the news post
I
about that?
I
Okay.
didn't, but I'm looking at the cover,
Oh yeah.
and this cover is incredible.
Right. Yeah. So I'm actually not sure why they want to do this, because I did feel like last time actually kind of gave away some things that were going to happen, but I guess
Mm,
it's just to get people excited for upcoming stories and stuff. And I'm still waiting for the current Star Wars comics to catch up to Return of the Jedi, because they've been
okay.
like filling in the gaps between the movies. So maybe because it's Jabba, maybe that's what they're pointing toward. That's my guess, but we'll find out in December. So that's going to be coming out this winter from Marvel Comics. More merchandise news from Regal Robot, who this company makes some amazing looking kind of themed furniture and themed decor. We are friends with them at Laughing Place. I've gotten a tour of their studio on Long Island, like 10
Oh,
minutes from where
awesome.
I grew up, which was amazing. But they've put out this new excuse me, Beskar Mythosaur magnet. If you know the Armorer's Forge in The Mandalorian, hanging above the entrance in that first season is the mythosaur skull shaped out of Beskar. So this is a miniature version of that. It's a magnet that you can put on your fridge. It looks very cool. Did you check that out? I'm sure you did.
I did, yeah,
Yeah.
those are awesome. They have a couple different iterations, right, of the
Yeah.
Mythosaur skull?
Yeah, so they have the one that's in the Armorer's Forge. They have previously they've done kind of a living mythosaur head in the same
Okay,
scale, and then the third one is the signet, which is the kind of the embossed or thing that gets
sure.
burned into the pauldron on the armor of, I think Bo-Katan has it, and you can get it on your armor if you're a Mandalorian. So it's just three different variations on that same idea. All very cool. You can check that out at regalrobot.com. Let's get into some Ahsoka news to kind of segue here. Ahsoka Tano is now a playable character in Fortnite, the video game or computer game. I've never played Fortnite. I kind of have
Me
a vague
either.
idea of what it is. What is your understanding of what Fortnite is?
I mean, it's kind
Becca,
of
do you?
like I'm probably totally wrong, but kind of like a almost like a World of Warcraft type thing where you get to play different campaigns or missions and you kind of work together with other people or venture out on your own, maybe. I don't know. It
Uh,
it seems like you get to build a lot of stuff too, or maybe that's Minecraft that I'm thinking of. I don't know. Am I
it's
totally
kind
off?
of. I think your guess is as good as mine, but I think when you said Warcraft, I thought of fantasy, but I don't think this has any fantasy
Right.
elements to it. I think my understanding, my very vague understanding of Fortnite is you get dropped on an island, like you parachute down on an island and you all fight each other like battle royale kind of.
Okay.
And I think the map is constantly getting smaller, so there's constantly more space. So you have to fight, and it's like last man standing kind of thing.
Okay.
Anyway, whatever Fortnite is, you can now play as Ahsoka Tano in that game. We're not getting any comments correcting us, so I'm assuming we're
So
right about
we're right. That's awesome.
that. Kyle did point out that I said Skeleton Crew earlier, and that is the title of a different Star Wars show coming up. So no intended confusion there. But let's see. Hasbro announced some new toys coming up, inspired by Ahsoka, Star Wars Ahsoka. I'm very excited for this specifically. We got the characters of Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati, who are the two kind of evil Jedi characters in this show. They're going to be getting Black Series figures in the 6-inch scale.
Mhm.
I've already pre-ordered them. I did it that day when they announced them. They look so cool. And then stuff that I won't buy, but also looks very cool because I just don't collect this kind of thing. But it's the helmet of
Yes.
Captain Rex, who appeared very briefly in that Anakin episode a couple weeks ago. And then you've got Sabine's lightsaber that used to be Ezra's lightsaber. It was actually kind of a plot point in this week's episode
Mhm.
about him not even wanting it back. I won't talk about that in a bit. And that's from the Force Effects Elite series of lightsabers, which are all really, really cool. So those will be coming out soon. You can learn more about that at HasbroPulse.com. Did you get to look at these Hasbro announcements, Becca,
Yes.
on your show?
We didn't talk about these on our show. It was in our shopping list, but I've definitely looked over your post there with all of the different figures. I think I put in some links to purchase some of the stuff
Oh, great.
too. So
Oh, terrific. I'm glad somebody did. Because
so yeah.
that's one of those things where like they did it as part of the Hasbro Pulse Con, I
Mhm.
think. And when I'm as you know, as you're aware, sometimes when you're writing up stories for our job, you kind of have to move on to the next thing and
Yep.
like almost kind of forget about the last thing that you did. So I'm glad somebody had the wherewithal to go back and add those links because my mind is always on like what is the next story or what am I doing next. Okay, also from Hasbro, like you mentioned before, I did that unboxing of
Mhm.
the Ahsoka toys that they sent me. You can watch that video, like a 45-minute video of me unboxing all the Ahsoka toys from Hasbro, including the Chatterback Chopper. So that's up on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. And then lastly, from Star Wars headlines and Ahsoka news, we got 4 new character posters this week. Now, your husband Kyle has pointed out that it's not really a poster if it's not printed out and hung on a wall somewhere. But yeah, these are poster-shaped images of the
Right.
characters
Right.
of Thrawn, Ezra Bridger, Enoch, who is the gold-faced stormtrooper guy, and the Great Mothers, who are the 3 witches
Mhm.
that live on this planet Peridia that we're on the show right now. So those are all the new character posters that came out on the social media from the official Star Wars accounts. And that's going to bring us to the end of Star Wars headlines for this week and to our main topic. Very excited to talk about Star Wars Ahsoka Episode 7, entitled Dreams and Madness. This is just came out last night, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern on Disney Plus. And before we get into talking about this episode specifically, I want to ask you, Bekah, what is your history with this character? I don't know if we've talked about this with you on the show before, but what was your history with Ahsoka Tano since she first appeared about 15 years ago in the Clone Wars cartoon?
I actually haven't watched any of the Clone Wars, maybe an episode here or there. So I'm really, like, really not familiar with Ahsoka from her, I guess, iteration or from her, yeah, from her beginning. But I did go to Star Wars weekends. I was working at Walt Disney World when Star Wars weekends was happening. So I've seen Ashley on stage a couple times. She was kind of like the host of the weekend. Great personality, great person. So I'm familiar with Ashley, but not so much with Ahsoka. So,
Okay.
yeah, my introduction really kind of came through The Mandalorian.
Oh, okay. So you didn't watch Rebels either, Star Wars Rebels?
No.
Okay, that's actually very interesting because I've been looking to get the perspective of people who don't know Ahsoka or Ezra or Sabine and see what they're thinking of this series because it is so reliant on that previous knowledge of Rebels. But that is a great segue to talk about my next question here. What have you thought of this series, Ahsoka? Did you feel lost or have you felt a connection to these characters in the first 6 episodes, not counting this week?
I would say I've definitely felt a connection to the characters. I've loved all the episodes so far. I really like the pacing. I like that, and I know that it's different than some of the other shows, but I like that we kind of get to take time and explore this world. I haven't felt lost. I know that I know that I don't understand maybe the significance of everything, but it's, I don't know. I felt like it was easy enough, friendly enough to someone who's not familiar with that. I even took a note that having no connections to Rebels, I really like the live action versions of these characters.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I did watch all of Rebels. I actually rewatched it this past winter, and I thought they have done a really wonderful job in casting the new actors to play these roles, with Ahsoka,
Mhm.
Sabine, Ezra, and then the actors that they did decide to carry over from the animation, like Lars Mikkelsen as Thrawn, I think are all doing a wonderful job too. Same as, Bo-Katan over on The Mandalorian
Mhm.
with Katie Sackhoff. I guess occasionally they have the right look as well as the right voice and the
Sure.
right, I don't know what it is. What is that special quality that you bring over to live action that works for some people and maybe doesn't work so well for others? I don't know, but it is working for me. Most of the cast, entirely, all of the cast. But coming into this week's episode, it's called Dreams and Madness, which is actually a reference. The title is a reference to a line from last week's episode that the character of Balin Skull says about how this planet, Peridia, is a land of dreams and madness. I think referencing kind of the stories that he heard about it growing up. So, what were your first thoughts coming out of this episode, Becca?
I mean, I really liked it, and as I said at the top of the show, I was very excited that this was gonna be the one that I'd get to talk about. It it covered, I think, a lot of ground, and we had a lot of characters that we got to spend time with. I liked that we were kind of following several different stories or several different things happening at the same
Yeah.
time. Um, yeah, I was intrigued and enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, this is the one where I think we had the most regular characters. Like every regular character from this series showed up in
Yeah.
this episode. And in fact, it opened back in the main galaxy on what I'm pretty sure was the planet Coruscant. Although in the established current canon Star Wars lore, after the fall of the Empire, they did move around the New Republic government to different planets after the fall of the Empire. So I think that was Coruscant. I'm not 100% sure. It could have been another like city based planet, but Hera is dragged into this hearing for her recent actions. She's gone against the orders of the New Republic Senate. And Mon Mothma, as the Chancellor, is there. There's that Senator Ziono, who is the guy who opposed her in the beginning of the season, and he's the one calling for her court martial. And then we get kind of a surprise, the big surprise guest appearance of this
Yeah.
episode. Uh, Really, the first, we got hints of Darth Vader in the visions that Ahsoka was having with Anakin and stuff, but really C-3PO in the real world of the show is the first like kind of major Star Wars character to show up from the movies in Ahsoka so far. So what did you think of the scene? What did you think of C-3PO's cameo as well?
I was actually happy to see him.
Yeah.
It wasn't too much. I thought it was just enough of a reference to, the the characters we already know, but
Yeah.
it didn't distract from anything that was happening, right there. But yeah, I enjoyed seeing him.
I like seeing him as well, and it's always great to hear Anthony Daniels' voice. I'm not
Yes.
sure if they, he's famously always been in the costume as well, but he's getting up there in years. I don't know if they actually flew, actually I think this show did shoot in England, so they wouldn't have had to fly him anywhere because he's British guy, but maybe they did bring him
Maybe.
around to the studio and put him back in that suit and shoot him on set. It's pretty neat that he's still playing this character, 45 plus years later, that he originated back in the original Star Wars film. And he's kind of there as a go-between for Princess Leia, who is
Mhm.
off screen but present in spirit, as
That
we know.
surprised
Yeah.
me. I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is taking place at a time where we haven't
Right.
yet said goodbye to."
Yeah, so it's between episode 6 and 7, Leia is out there serving as a senator, and she kind of helps Hera get out of trouble here by enacting this ruse where she pretends to have ordered her or approved her mission to that planet Cetos. So yeah, it was cool to have C-3PO show up, and it makes sense that he would be there
Mhm.
at this point in the timeline. So I was happy to see him as well. And then Mon Mothma comes up to Hera at the end of that scene, and she asks her like, do we really have to be worried here about Grand Admiral Thrawn? And I think, as the audience, we kind of know the answer is yes, because
Mhm.
they are setting up this big arc of Thrawn returning. But at that point, we basically, Hera's response is like, oh, we have to fear for the worst and then hope for the best. But then
Mhm.
we cut to Peridia, where Ahsoka is about to arrive. They're on the T6 Jedi shuttle, and there's another cameo appearance by Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker in hologram form, training Ahsoka in. Ahsoka says there's like 20 something of these recordings that he left behind.
Mhm.
What did you think of this appearance? What do you think of this training scene before they get to the planet?
I was actually wondering if it's a reference to something that had happened in the Clone Wars series. Was this or yeah, that basically that I was wondering
I
if
don't
I was missing some significance of that.
I don't think specifically. I don't. I could be wrong. I have actually only sat through the whole Clone Wars series once, so
Okay.
I could be wrong about this. I don't think it's a reference to anything specific, except for the fact that Anakin was her master,
Mhm.
and that Hu Yang kind of says like, "Oh, it was thoughtful of him to leave these for her in case something happened to him," which it did. So it's just kind of to remind us that Anakin did have his good qualities as well. That would be my
Okay.
thought on that. But yeah, and also I guess they had Hayden Christensen, so they might as well use him
Right.
in another brief appearance there before they get to the planet. And when they come out of hyperspace, they're attacked. Thrawn had given this order to attack any of the Purrgil or Star Whales, as they've been calling them, as soon as they appear above the planet. And there's a big battle scene. Now, I would say my initial reaction to this episode was it was a very action heavy one, which
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
tend to be my favorites. I always prefer like the talking episodes or where we get a lot of information. But this was an action heavy one. There's a space battle. There's a battle on the ground as well. But what did you think of that element of this episode, the action sequences?
I enjoyed them. Sometimes I'm like, "Okay, I don't wanna watch people fighting again
Yeah.
and again." But I thought everything was, again, with, like, the pacing was really good and very interesting, and you can tell there's a lot of actual physical action going on and not so much like, "Oh, we're gonna use a computer to
Right.
create this stuff." So that those close hand-to-hand combat, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I've been really impressed by the choreography, the fight choreography on the
Mhm.
show. I think that that team, the stunt coordinators and the fight choreographers have been doing such a wonderful job. And like you said, just making everything feel real, like they're actually having these battles in person and not, I mean, most most of it, I'm sure, is against the volume, the
Right.
big LED screen, or some of it. Actually, some it does feel like some of these scenes might have been shot outside against the rocks and stuff, but the fact that we can't really tell, I think, is a testament to how good the visual effects look these days. But yeah, I do enjoy the action. I think I enjoy the action more on my second viewing when I'm not like I want more info and I want the plot to
Mhm.
go faster, or give me more, and then I can on the second viewing I can sit back and really
And
enjoy. I don't know if you feel the same way, do you?
not so much for this one, but yes, in general, yeah, I
Yeah,
would, yeah, it's nice to be able to go back a second time and kinda like, "Okay, I got my initial reaction
yeah.
taken care of, now I can absolutely enjoy everything that's happening."
So Ezra and Sabine are kind of traveling through this landscape in those these turtle crab creatures have these little shells that they live in. They also, they're their houses, and there are their vehicles as well. So they're traveling across this landscape and they come across Balin's skull and Shin Hati. There's a battle that happens there. Then Ahsoka flies down, brings the stormtroopers following her, and there's another big battle with all those characters. But the really interesting thing that I thought happened that we kind of referenced earlier was this moment where Sabine, once they're entering into this battle, Sabine offers Ezra his lightsaber back, and he kind of turns her down and says, "No, I don't need it anymore. It's yours now." And he's able to hold his own against Shin
Mhm.
Hati without a lightsaber. He keeps blocking her swings. And we're so used to seeing Jedi fighting the Sith or whoever else with their lightsabers as a defensive weapon that it's almost kind of jarring to see somebody do that with the Force and like hold back the lightsaber. But what do you think it is about, you know, I guess my question is, why is Ezra special in this way? Because if Jedi are able to do that, why do they need lightsabers at all? I don't know.
That's
What was your interpretation of that?
Yeah, I thought maybe, like, it's almost like a heightened sense, like,
Yeah.
if you blindfold yourself, you're gonna be paying attention to sounds differently or how stuff feels. So, it was, to me, it's more like, oh, he's forced himself to be comfortable without having that tool, and
Yeah.
so he's learned to channel his energy through the Force that way instead of needing the assistance of a lightsaber. I don't know. I figure it was more like a self practice thing.
Right.
Like, what can I use? How can I do this without having to use anything else?
Yeah, and in a lot of Star Wars lore, they talk about how the lightsaber is kind of an extension of the Jedi, So I guess in a way he's kind of worked it so he doesn't need that part anymore, that it's still kind of there without him needing to physically hold it as defense. But I did think it was really well executed. All that stuff was really exciting. The choreography, like I mentioned, and then just like the specific moves, I felt like it was fresh and different enough of a fight to keep me
Yes,
entertained.
that's a
Did
really
you
good way
did
to
you
put
feel
it.
that way too?
Yes.
So there's that whole battle, and also involved with this battle, more in a defensive way, are these creatures called the Noti, Noti, who are kind of like turtles meet hermit crabs almost. And I really liked how, Ezra says they're a peaceful species. They don't really engage in battle. They don't have weapons, but they do have kind of a defensive capability. And it reminded me, I'm sure Dave Filoni was going for this, but in old Western movies where you see them circling the wagons, it's called,
Mhm.
and they form all the shells into a big circle, and it helps as a defensive maneuver. But then some of the like comic relief involving the Noti, there's little moments where like, oh, they're poking their head out of the door or the window and then like quickly ducking back in. And just their little moments in that battle reminded me a lot of the Gungans in Phantom Menace, but in a positive way where I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this feels very Star Wars, and it feels like the kind of sense of humor that George Lucas would have put into a battle sequence like that. I don't know. What did you think of these creatures, the Noti, and their role in that battle?
Well, first, I think they look like Han Solo. Their apparel kind of not their features or anything, but their apparel, they're like they look like, gunslinger Han
Yeah,
Solo.
yeah, they
Um,
do kind of.
I actually liked them. It's always hit or miss with me with creatures, and like I love cute things, but sometimes I feel that stuff's unnecessary. I think that the Noti are interesting, and I like how they've been utilized in Ahsoka so far. And it makes sense that Ezra would like, chill out with these people and not have a lightsaber. And yeah, I appreciated their, yes, like you're saying, their comic relief. I didn't think it was too much. I thought it was just enough.
Yeah, I dug them too, and I also like that sometimes they were actual puppets. Like in a lot of shots, they're CGI, but
Mhm.
there's like that one shot where you can tell, oh, that was really a puppet. Where like Ezra like reaches in and pushes one back into the window of
Right?
his little shell. I was like, oh, that was actually like physically really there on set, which I always really appreciate when they do that. And the human or the live action characters can kind of interact with them in that, in that real physical space. That always helps to sell the reality
Yes.
of it to me. Oh, one note I forgot to mention earlier in that opening scene. So in that conference with
Mhm.
Hera and Mon Mothma, there's a couple of Mon Calamari in there, and the one to the right of Mon Mothma on the dais on the panel up there, to me that looked just like Admiral Akbar, and I kind of went and like looked at Akbar's uniform in Return of the Jedi, and it looked a lot like that.
Okay.
I asked some friends, and they didn't think it was him, but I don't know. Did that jump out to you as being specifically Akbar, or was that just supposed to be like a random generic Mon
I
Calamari?
I thought it was too young to be Akbar. If
Okay.
if such a thing is possible with Mon Calamari. But I like the idea, and it makes sense. I mean, if Mon Mothma's still doing her thing, if
Yeah.
Leia's still out there, if we haven't yet gotten to, the later trilogy, then yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense. Or we've just started Rise of, or yeah, Force Awakens. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was probably somebody else.
Okay, that's fair. So it's about 50-50 of the people I've asked whether they think it's Akbar or not. I don't know if we'll ever get that confirmed, but yeah, Akbar does survive until, he dies in The Last Jedi, which takes place like 25 or 30 years after this. So I guess like around 25 years. Yeah, so he would still be around. I don't know if he would be sitting there on that panel with Mon Mothma, but maybe Dave Filoni will confirm or deny at some point. Okay, let's talk about Thrawn and what his end game is here, because we do get some more good Thrawn. He's not involved with the action, but he is commanding things from behind the scenes in that Night Sister castle there on the planet Peridia. What do you think his? I mean, if you had to predict what's going to happen with Thrawn in next week's episode, where do you think he is? Do you think he's going to make it out of there? Do you think he's going to escape and make it back to the main galaxy?
Yes, I think so. I think that would be an interesting way to end this, or at least
Yeah,
this season of Ahsoka, assuming there aren't more. I think part of the intrigue of him is that he's able to like actually execute his plans.
right.
So I don't think that they would be this far along. I don't think Thrawn would have pushed to be as far along. Does that make any sense? Um, if he wasn't certain that he'd be able to get out. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think he's going to be able to make it
yeah.
out
I
of this
totally get what you're
galaxy.
saying. They waited so long to bring him in that it would be a real shame if he didn't continue on into other media. But I think that's kind of what they're setting up. Um, and I guess the big question I have about this is this whole problem of coming and going from this other galaxy. They had to find this map in the orb. The bad guys had to find that orb map, bring it up on that hologram, feed the information into
Hmm.
the ship, and that's how they got there. And now that orb is destroyed. I guess they still have the information in the computer on the ship. Is that, to your understanding of your watching of the show, are they going to use the information they already have to get back where they came from?
I would, in terms of Thrawn, or in terms
Yeah.
of, yeah, I
In
think
terms of the bad guys.
the
Yeah. In
bad
terms
guys.
of the drones. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Um, that they also have the witches. I don't know
Right.
that they'll be. I think they'll, yes, probably use their existing information, or be able
Okay.
to conjure up something else to
So
at least get them to another point where they can connect back to.
right. So the
I don't know.
implication then is that Ahsoka and Hu Yang, because they arrived at that galaxy in the whale mouth, they don't
Hmm.
necessarily have that same information, right? Because Thrawn, and when he traveled there with Ezra at the end of Rebels, which I know you haven't seen, but that they were transported by the whales. So I guess the reason they were trapped there and couldn't go back to the other galaxies because they didn't have the coordinates or the hyperspace route or whatever in the Star Destroyer's computer. So now they do. They're able to make it back. So theoretically, Ahsoka and company could be trapped there, right? Do you think that might
I
happen at the end of this next episode?
I think that would be an interesting route route to go. But I also feel like, because they've used the whales before, Ahsoka could go back up into
Okay.
that space. You've also got Sabine, and you have Ezra with you. I think the three of them might have to come up with an unconventional way. And Hu Yang,
Right.
I think their brain power together, they could figure out something else. But I do like the idea of stranding them in the finale. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it is a little too similar to what Ezra was already stranded there. So I don't know if they would repeat that story beat. But at the same time, like the whales ran away, right? Because they were getting shot at.
Right, but they could be coming back through that area
Yeah.
through that area.
Yeah. What do you think of this? The cargo that's being loaded on the Star Destroyer. Now we kind of talked about this last week. About again, it came from the animation, but the Night Sisters have this power of revitalizing, kind of reanimating their own the dead bodies of their own people. So like this possibility of like an undead army that
So
Thrawn might
Star
be building, either from whatever's in those coffins, and some people, yeah, have theorized that maybe some of the stormtroopers are already undead. What are your thoughts about that from your read of the show?
I mean, if we're doing stuff with witches, and that one, is it Merrick? Like
Yeah,
dusted
yeah,
when he was attacked, or it was attacked. Maybe we could, yeah, vampires, zombies. Yeah, I think yes, an undead army would be terrifying and interesting, and something that I don't think we've seen. Well, I haven't seen that in
yeah.
Star Wars yet, and I
Right.
think that the New Republic definitely not prepared for that.
That's very true. Now, people have pointed out in this week's episode that when the stormtroopers were dying on the battlefield there, they weren't evaporating in smoke like that guy Marok did a couple episodes ago. So maybe they weren't undead, but certainly seems like something's going on with all those caskets that they're loading into the Star Destroyer. So I think
I would
that's probably going
think
to pay off. Yeah.
you have at least a percentage of uh, your force or fleet would
Yeah.
actually still be
Right.
alive, or like maybe not human, but clones, like actual, not reanimated. So there could be a small, uh, small number of them that wouldn't disintegrate.
Yeah. I really hope at some point we find out what happened in those middle years where they were exiled on this planet. Like, I hope that part of the story gets filled in a novel or comic or something, because that's always what Star Wars is really good at, is like zooming in on this one part and like giving us the background of things that we didn't get to see. Anything else that you really liked about this episode? It kind of ends on this cliffhanger of, oh, Ezra's like really excited to go home, and we had this question like, are we sure that they're going to be able to make it home? But did you have any other favorite or least favorite moments, or anything that worked or didn't work for you?
Um, Not even, no, like I enjoyed the episode on the whole. I'm not thinking of nothing's jumping to mind right now that I particularly disliked. I kept hoping that Sabine would actually be forthcoming with Ezra,
Yeah.
just so he could be a little bit more prepared for all that was going to be coming their way. But if you don't think you're being chased anymore, because she's under the impression, at least to a point, she was under the impression that, okay, well, we're stranded out here together. So maybe, yeah, you're like, from her thought process, you wouldn't need to tell him everything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we are kind of still waiting for that other shoe to drop of Ezra finding out that she kind of allied herself with the
With
bad guys to get there for him. Maybe that'll happen next week. The other kind of thing that we didn't mention about Sabine is that in this week's episode, she was able to kind of have that Force connection
Mhm.
with Ahsoka, which is really, I mean, we've been seeing her try to levitate things or move things with the Force all season, but this is the first time that, to my mind, we've actually seen her use the Force. Now, that brought to mind the end of The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is dangling from the bottom of
Mhm.
Cloud City, and he calls out to Leia with the Force, and Leia's able to hear him, which was the first hint that we got really at the end of Empire there, that Leia might have Force sensibilities or Force powers as well. Now, I think there's another way to read that, in that it's kind of like a one-way conversation. Like, Luke, because Luke is a Jedi, he's able to project his voice into Leia's mind, and maybe because Ahsoka is so powerful in the Force that she's able to talk to
To Sabine.
Sabine through the Force. But I don't know. Do you think this is a two-way street? Do you think we're gonna see more Force usage from Sabine next week before the season is over?
Yes, but not a lot.
Okay.
I don't think she's gonna like suddenly come into powers, but I do think she might be able to tap into something that she maybe hasn't quite believed was actually there. So yeah, I think she's got a little bit in her.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably. I mean, Hu Yang didn't say she didn't have any Force powers. He just said she didn't have, or she had less connection to the Force than any other Jedi before. So I guess that doesn't mean that doesn't rule her out entirely of having the Force. Let's say hi to Steven Singleton from
Hey.
Wyoming in the comments there. Hi, Steven. All right. Next week is the finale. We don't know if it's the season finale or the series finale of Star Wars Ahsoka. I guess the first question is, do you hope we get more of this show? And if so, I guess, what do you hope happens, or what are you expecting is going to happen in the finale? And what would you want to see in a second season of Ahsoka?
Ooh, hadn't thought so far into a second season. I would definitely like a second season. Um, Absolutely loving these characters. I would like to see more of the like entire Rebels crew, even if they're not all working together. I think there's a few characters we haven't from Rebels that haven't been introduced in live action yet, right? So
Well, we saw Zeb in The Mandalorian very briefly. He was in
okay,
that
okay,
pilot bar. So
then
I'm
maybe.
I'm kind of hoping he pops up in the finale. But yeah, there's like Agent Callus or whatever that
Mhm.
has not been in live action. So there are others. Yes.
So yeah, some of that I think for season 2 could be very, very interesting. I like following Ahsoka. I'm very intrigued by this older version of her. I really think Rosario's awesome,
Yeah.
and definitely want to spend more time with that character. In terms of the finale, I'm not quite sure what Balin is up to,
Right.
and I kind of feel like he's not, I don't need him to have a redemption or anything, but I kind of feel like he still has some light side persuasion, or
Mm.
it kind of is able to look at things very much like from both
Right.
sides, and so I'd be interested to see him, I don't know, maybe help Ahsoka get off the planet or something, or some kind of unsteady alliance to get them to
Mm.
wherever. I might be totally missing what he's planning to do when he left uh wow, I can't Shin
Right, right, yeah.
on her own there, but I he's an intriguing character
Yeah,
as well.
in my written review, I called him the wild card of the show because we really don't know what he is going to do in this next episode. We have no, I mean, he talks about having sensed this power on this
Mhm.
planet that might be even greater than the Night Sisters, and he said he wants to kind of close the loop or end this repeating rise and fall of the
Yes.
Jedi Order.
Yes.
So what does that entail? We don't really know. But I am very, very curious to see where that's going. And the other big concern with that is that Ray Stevenson, who's an amazing, amazing actor, and
Mhm.
definitely like one of my three favorite things about this show, absolutely. And unfortunately passed away before the show started releasing. And you got to wonder, like, okay, is this character going to make it through the finale? And if he does, if he was intended to survive this season, like how are they gonna follow up on that without having access to the actor? And Kyle said Zeb's not dead, baby. Yeah.
Um,
Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how powers are going to work or anything,
Yeah.
but if there is some dark power, or even some, I don't know, just some power, I suppose it could kind of transform his
Mm,
appearance, but you could still have the same, like
right.
essence of the character. I don't know.
Yeah.
Assuming he's
Interesting.
supposed to do more, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could
So
see. Well, and like with Ahsoka, she's no Jedi. She left the Jedi Order.
right.
She's not aligned. I know she's very much like she would call her like a neutral. I think Baylan's definitely not neutral, but I could
Right.
see both of them wanting some of the same things, but for different reasons. So,
Mm. Yeah, like Ahsoka's kind of like left of center and
mhm,
Balin is like right of center. Like they're neither of them are on the
yeah,
polar opposites, but they're this kind of the same position but on opposite sides. Yeah, very interesting. A lot of questions going into the finale. One of them being like, how are they going to wrap all this up in one episode? I think the answer is they aren't really, because they're leading to so much other stuff that's hopefully coming up soon. Another piece of news that we didn't really talk about: the writer strike is over, thankfully. So hopefully,
mhm.
the Screen Actors Guild can also settle things with the studios, and Hollywood can get back to work making all this stuff. But at the very least, the writers can start writing, and we can look forward to more of this amazing content coming up eventually. Okay, that's gonna end our conversation here about Star Wars Ahsoka and bring us to our final segment here on Who's the Bossk. Also related to pop culture, as pretty much all we talk about here on the show is. It is called First Steps into a Larger World, where we just talk about the media that we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week is I've been continuing my trend of horror movies lately because we're kind of getting in the Halloween season here, and I had grown up watching the Child's Play movies probably earlier than I should have. I mean,
Okay.
it started in 1988. The first one came out in 88. I was 8 years old, and I don't think I saw it until maybe 2 or 3 years later on HBO or something, which would have made me like 11, which is still probably too early. But I remember watching and liking those movies in that period. So I went back and rewatched them, had not seen them since the 90s, and I enjoyed them. They're super goofy, but super fun. And then I watched for the first time the fourth movie, Bride of Chucky, which introduces Jennifer Tilly's character, and that's a lot of fun too. It's very different from the first three, which makes it kind of fresh too. And I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of those. And I want to get to the point where I can watch the new show. There's a
Okay.
Chucky series on Peacock that I heard really good things about, and they made that maze at Halloween Horror Nights
Yeah.
about it. So I'm just in a Chucky kind of mood lately. How about you, Becca? What have you been watching or reading or playing anything outside of Star Wars?
Well, my brother had the Legend of Zelda games for the GameCube. I have a GameCube, but not the games. So he sent me Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. So I've been making my way through the agonizingly slow Wind Waker. But then in terms of what I've been watching, we just finished Full Circle on HBO, which is Steven Soderbergh, and
Oh,
it's a 6-episode series. It wasn't quite what I was hoping going into it, but I was satisfied with the conclusion of the story. So yeah,
okay. Oh, I gotta check that out. I like Steven Soderbergh. He's been kind of hit or miss, but he's so like prolific. He's made dozens and dozens of movies over the years that I've seen maybe half of them. But yeah, he's a talented guy, obviously. So it sounds like something I'd be interested in. Was there anything else that you had wanted to mention, or?
rewatching Loki in
Oh yeah,
preparation for season 2. I'm very
yeah.
excited for that
That's
show.
start. It's funny, like Ahsoka's ending next week, and then right away, like 2 days later or something, we're gonna get Loki's season 2 premiere. So super excited for that too. That'll be a big thing to talk about coming up. All right, that's the end of this week's episode of Who's the Boss. I want to thank my guest, of course, Bekah Burbank. Thank you so much for coming back, taking an hour out of your busy week to come and chat about Star Wars. Love to have you on the show.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
And where can people find you and your Laughing Place contributions if you want to send them anywhere?
Yeah, of course, you can go to Laughing Place or Disney Merch Show on, I guess, X now instead of
Yeah.
Twitter, and on Instagram. So yeah, Disney Merch Show.
I just today finally deleted my Twitter account. Every time I go on there, I get angry. And this morning was just the worst because I just like everywhere I turned, there was something making me angry. And I keep getting in arguments with people. And I just like, I'm just done with this. It's not good for my mental health at all. So
No, I
who's
know.
Who's the Bossk Pod is no longer on Twitter, but I am
No.
still on Instagram and Threads. Threads is where I just like write about the movies that I've watched, and then
Okay.
Instagram, I just put some photos up there, whatever I'm out doing. So you can follow me there. Always visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. Next week on Who's the Boss, of course, we've got the Ahsoka finale. So look forward to that coming up. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you out there for listening or watching here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again. Bye.